Into, we tell the people, lock the door, leave the place. It isn't even worth it for an exorcist to go in there.
Do you guys have good headphones?
No.
Because that really, really sounds cool with headphones.
It does sound great. I was listening going, whoa.
Yeah, I should have played the New Zealand one. But so welcome everybody again to the Warren Files. Tonight we're going to be talking about mental health and the paranormal. And it's two things that really, really mix quite frequently, at least from what I've come to that conclusion. So we have Chris on with us tonight, Chris McKinnell. He's the director of the foundation. Cleo is with us. She is the regional director for New Zealand and Australia, correct?
That's right. Yep. And
as well as most of Europe except for Spain.
Gotcha. And then we have Father Ken is the director of all Spanish-speaking members, correct?
Correct. Spanish subdivision and the Spanish part of Europe.
Gotcha. And then Bill is the director of the Southeast.
Yep.
And also has, you got your own team that's pretty busy too.
Yeah.
So.
Am I frozen for you guys?
Yeah, your screen froze, but we can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, but you're still awfully handsome.
Yeah. Blink if you're still with us.
He's a good-looking Jersey guy.
Well, like I said, I'm going to monitor the comments pretty much and let you guys take over this topic. And I hope to learn a lot because this is not my expertise. So I guess we can start with Chris. So what are your thoughts on the mental aspect of the paranormal?
Well, I have 3 goals I want to share with everyone this evening. This really is this is the central part of working with the paranormal. There are 3 things you need to keep in mind. Most of the cases we get are fear-induced. They are purely psychological. They are either drug abuse, domestic violence, past traumas, mental illness, anything of that sort. But there's also 10% of our cases which involve the paranormal and or mental illness or other psychological issues. Just because you have a psychological issue does not mean you don't have a paranormal issue. Don't be afraid to talk to us about those things, because that would be like going to the doctor and only telling them half your symptoms and expecting them to know what to do. We need to know everything. So that's vitally important for you to understand. There's no stigma involved here. I've suffered from depression in the past. I've even suffered from anxiety attacks when my son went to Thailand. I thought I was dying. Only time in my life that's happened, but boy, I remember it well. The other thing we're going to address this evening is how the paranormal attracts a lot of people with mental health issues as investigators. It attracts them. They're looking for something to fill a void. And you should be very careful about who you work with when you're doing this, when you're looking for help or when you're looking to learn. So keep that in mind as well. Having said that, greetings from beautiful New Zealand. It is truly an amazingly beautiful country. Let me just give you I don't know if you can see the ocean and the beauty right there outside the window. I have to thank Kimberly Lendrum. She is our assistant director for services here in Australia and New Zealand, for giving me a place to stay for the week. This is probably the nicest home I've ever stayed in my entire life. And having said that, I am now going to turn this over to Cleo.
Thank you. I think that you raised some really important points, and Chris and I were on Breakfast TV in New Zealand this morning, so we had a bit of an early start, and it was actually something that we touched on kind of after we came off air. And one of the presenters had raised the mental health aspect kind of right at the end of the interview, and he just kind of threw it in there at the end. But it kind of continued off air as a bit of a short discussion. And the point that I made to him at the time was that paranormal activity, as with anything in life, is a vibration, and vibrations tend to attract other like vibrations. So if you have mental health problems, often it can bring down your vibration, it can bring down your energy, it can make you feel low. Obviously, there are a variety of mental health conditions, and sometimes those can involve more hyper states, but often that does kind of coincide with a lower mood as well, and that can attract negative entities to you. And so these things are never mutually exclusive. The one can attract the other. Likewise, if you are suffering from paranormal activity, the suffering that can involve within a family, within a household, is really very real. And if you've worked in paranormal investigation for any length of time, you will experience that firsthand. I mean, Haunted New Zealand have been called out to cases where families are so frightened living in their own homes that they're all sleeping in one room of the house downstairs because they're terrified to have the kids in different rooms or to be upstairs at night time because of things that are going on. And because of that then feeds into their mental health as well. So the paranormal activity is then causing anxiety or depression and other things. So we do often find that they go hand in hand, and I think it is really important to talk about mental health anyway. I mean, I suffered from postnatal depression after I had my son. I'm very open about the fact that I'm also diagnosed with ADHD, which I'm medicated for, and I think that we should all feel comfortable talking about these things because mental health is a very important of our health as human beings. We have our physical health, we have our mental health, and that does feed into our experience of the paranormal as well. And the one, as I say, can cause and can alter the other.
Absolutely. What you just said reminded me of something I was reading in The Demonologist just 2 weeks ago. I always tell people about raising the vibrations in their home. And I was reading one of the chapters for our Patreon subscribers. And my grandmother actually said exactly the same thing, that it's very important to clean your home, to bring light and joy into the home, open the windows and the blinds, and to put on music that makes you feel good, and to play comedies and other things, and put love into the home, because what you have in your home is what you attract. It's almost trite because we talk about it in all of our different cultures about attracting what we put out into the universe. But it's true. It's absolutely true. And having said that, I would like to now turn this over to Father Ken Torres.
Hey everyone, good evening. Father Kenneth Torres here, Doctor of Divinity, which I specialize in world religions theology. I also have a master's in ministry. And so a lot of the work that entails master's in ministry is a lot of pastoral counseling, spiritual counseling. So the advice that I'm going to give is non-medical advice. It's going to be holistic. It's going to be faith-based. But I just want to put it out there that it's okay if you're struggling. It's okay if you're feeling sad and you're feeling depressed. These are part of everyday emotions. It's okay to not be okay. I also want to get the stigma and the notion out there, this fallacy, this false narrative out there amongst people who are Christians and believers that if you have a mental illness, that if you're suffering from depression, that you're possessed by a demon and that you should never seek mental help. That is a fallacy. That is false. All right. So if you are a believer of the faith and you are suffering from any type of mental illness, just know that it's okay to see a mental health professional. It's okay to take medication. It's okay to seek counseling. And I just want to get that out the way first and foremost.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Bill, are you with us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
I'm
Bill
working
is
on
our
the camera.
member who is too shy to show you his face, which is a shame because he's such a handsome man.
It's always the IT guy that has the issue. I'm working on the camera. I'll try to get to it. For a lot of people who maybe don't know, during the day, I am an IT director for a psychiatric drug and alcohol treatment facility. So I have been around this on the other side for about 9 years now. And while I may not be an actual therapist in there, I do interact with the patients. I have sat with patients and talked to them. And I've been doing the paranormal for over 30 years. So I've encountered a lot of issues where it was just mental health. It was both. And just like everybody's been saying, one of the biggest things is that everybody should not be afraid to tell us any info they have. Because if they say, hey, I was diagnosed with bipolar, with schizophrenia, it doesn't mean we're going to go, well, that's your problem. Have a nice day. You know, where it's important to us that we know about that in order to help us figure out what is going on and get you the proper help. Or else if we don't know that, we can actually harm you more.
Amen.
That's highly.
It's disheartening to see people so afraid of their own mental illness that they actually are manifesting paranormal phenomena because they're terrified to deal with what's going on internally. And we have amazing power, each of us. And when our fear takes control, we can manifest some terrible things. So it's very important that we address everything. I mean, I can't count the number of times I've recounted the horrors of the Maurice Theriault case and how at that time in our research, we didn't yet really understand the value of dealing with the psychological underpinnings that make a person vulnerable to the paranormal. And ultimately,
Mind, body, and spirit.
His death. Chrissy Strahan says, don't demonic entities feed off of poor mental health and they use that to gain strength and manifest? Years ago, not too many years ago, that is exactly what I would have said. I no longer believe that. And I'm going to circle back and address this. But first, I want to open that up to the panel and see what their views on this are.
Jeff, can you please bring that question back up again?
Yep.
Thank you. So don't demonic entities feed off poor mental health? Well, obviously, you know, I come from a different perspective and I have a difference in opinion with Chris. I don't necessarily think that it happens all the time, but I do think that there are some significant cases in which a person is weakened in mental health, and whatever you call it, a demonic entity can feed off that energy. But I think more importantly, what we had to revert back to is we have to look at the original mental health of the person, their well-being originally before this happened. So I would revert back to that. The most important thing is just looking at your primary health, your mental health as it is, and we would go from there. So I'm 50-50 with this because I've seen difference. I've seen different things, but that's where I'll stay with my opinion.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same. I mean, I've seen it. Yeah, I kind of have to agree. I don't have too much more to say that, but I would have to agree with Father Ken.
I think Father Ken made a really interesting point, actually, and I'd just like to kind of echo, which I think was kind of the real nugget that he shared there, which is that poor mental health can weaken you. It can weaken your defenses against these things, and it can make you more vulnerable to that sort of thing. And that's why when we take on cases, when we do investigations, when we work with clients, we always encourage, if it seems to us that there's a possibility that there may be a mental health issue involved, we always urge people, in fact, we insist that people go and get a full psychological or psychiatric assessment in order that we can discover what's going on there in terms of their mental health and that they can be treated for that. And the reason for that is not because we want to use that as an excuse for everything that's happening to them, but it's really to strengthen their own resilience and their own personal defenses, and that way they are also in the best possible position to protect themselves and defend themselves against what's going on as well. And I think that's really important. I don't really think that entities necessarily feed off poor mental health per se, but I think that they can take advantage of those situations. It's kind of almost a bit like leaving the front door open and having a sign that says welcome. I think it's just much more easy sometimes for things to get in that way. I think then that actually what they would feed off is the kind of personal energies of that person rather than their mental health per se. So perhaps their fear and all of the stuff that then comes after. And that's perhaps where they're gaining their strength from as they further weaken the person and cause more fear. So that negative entity, whether it's demonic or just something else nasty, can grow in strength at the expense of that person.
Yep.
Can I jump in here real quick for 1 second?
Well.
Yes.
Yeah, I posted this comment. So Chris, do you want to explain how people can get help from the foundation?
Yes, absolutely. Well, obviously, go to www.warrenfiles.com or warrenlegacy.com. We have a Google form on there, which you will fill out, letting us know your contact information, what basically what's going on with you. And then we will get started on contacting you, setting up an interview, and then possibly bringing a team in, depending on your needs. Just to circle back to Cleo's answer, which I thought was wonderfully nuanced and really on the spot. For me, what you put into a haunting is what you're going to get out of it. If it's a human spirit's just going to be a human spirit, and it's going to do whatever the hell it wants. If it's a cranky old man who doesn't want you in his home, he's going to let you know you're not welcome. But when it's this other thing that we have labeled demonic, that's all about us, to me. That's about what we're putting out there. And when you're putting out anger, fear, hatred, that's how it manifests. It manifests in a very negative way. So we need to deal with that underlying issue that makes you vulnerable. In other words, we have to deal with your negativity to help fight against the negativity of that entity, whether it be a thought form that we've manifested ourselves from the energy in the home, or if it's an actual individual that's out to hurt you. Still,
I think was going to say, I think the real disservice, that we do to ourselves as human beings is, we don't want to face what we're going through. So it's a lot easier for us to say, let's blame a demon, let's blame a spirit, instead of blaming our own mental and physical health. And I think that's an issue that as humans in society we have. We are ashamed most of the time to admit we have a mental illness. We are ashamed to admit, and there's nothing to be ashamed about that. So when that happens, what we do is we build our own narrative, and it's easier to say, hey, you know what? I've got a demon that's bothering me. But in reality, it's probably not a demon. It's probably the trauma you suffered. It's the sexual, the drug abuse, all the bad things that you've gone through, and you've created a cocoon around yourself, a barrier of protection. And so you blame and you're deflecting. Deflecting, I would say, is a major term.
Yeah.
100%.
People get into denial and they want to externalize the thing that's actually tormenting them so that they can point a finger at it and say, it's that. When in reality, it's us. Not always, don't get me wrong. And even when we've externalized that, we can actually manifest it into a spirit form that can actually cause us tremendous harm. Go ahead, Bill. I apologize.
No problem. I was going to say, I've actually had a bunch of cases where I dealt with where the people didn't want to accept it because, like you were saying, it's easier to say it's paranormal than admit you have a problem, that is mental or psychiatric or whatever. I had a case with a father that had a young girl, and we went there and we worked with them, and I don't think he wanted to accept that she had something other than the paranormal. For him, the paranormal was easier to explain and try to fix than what we realized was multiple personality disorder. So it's very hard for him to accept that because it's his little 9-year-old girl, where it's very easy to say, hey, it's a ghost, how do we get rid of it? And I don't have to take her and be embarrassed and have her be embarrassed and, have this stigma on her about being crazy. It's absolutely one of the things. And the hardest thing to deal with is trying to convince the person that it's not paranormal.
Mm-hmm.
That's the hardest thing.
Sorry, Bill.
No, go ahead.
And sometimes, we've had cases whereby you've got somebody who's contacted us for help, and as part of their mental health, they're suffering from delusions. And the problem with delusions is that for the person who is suffering with them, those delusions are their reality. They can't see that they are having delusions, and that really what they think is reality is in fact something that has been constructed by their own mind. And it's really impossible for us, as we're not mental health professionals, we are paranormal investigators. A lot of us have personal experience with mental health issues. A lot of us have got do a lot of amateur reading about it, but we aren't qualified to make diagnosis or to offer treatment or health advice on that kind of thing, which is why we do always urge people to go and seek professional help. And even as you say, Bill, it's very difficult to explain to a third party that their family member may be suffering from a mental health issue. It can be even harder when it's the person themselves. And most people at some point become aware when they have anxiety or depression. For me, it took a long time to realize that I had depression. I was very low by the time the penny finally dropped, because it can come on very gradually. It's very insidious like that. It sneaks up on you. It can go a long way before you realize what's happening. And with delusions, I think that's even worse. I wanted to go back to something that somebody else said earlier. It was a case that we had in New Zealand quite a long time ago. And we got called out to a family who was living in South Auckland, not too far from where you are now, Chris. And there was an adult son who was living in the family home with his parents, and due to his quite severe mental illness, he wasn't really capable of living independently. And they were very open with the fact that he was diagnosed as a schizophrenic. And it would have been very easy for us to have just, written off the case as being a mental health issue. But we did feel that perhaps it was, there was something more to be had there. And so we did go along and investigate. And from talking with him and from talking with the family, there was a real myriad of stuff that was happening. It seemed to us that he was what would be called a highly sensitive person. And I know people have talked about being sensitive to energies and other people's energies in the comments there I've seen go past. And he was very sensitive to other people's emotions and energies that were around. And it was affecting him in those ways. Interestingly, the house itself was actually built underneath a major power line that was running directly overhead, which unfortunately was something we could do really nothing about. But there were other energies in the home that were affecting him. The home was actually very clean. And actually cleaning the home is a great way that, as Chris said earlier, you can raise the vibration of your home and improve the situation. But it was incredibly cluttered. There were, it was tidy, don't get me wrong, but there was just a lot of stuff in there. Every surface was covered in doilies, and each doily had a million little trinkets. And it was all, it was all beautifully kept and very clean and, very well loved, precious possessions of the family. But these things can really stagnate the flow of energy around the home. And I think that situation, combined with these power lines overhead and the highly sensitive nature of this man, were really all contributing to what he was experiencing in the home. So sometimes things can be much more complicated than it might be at first glance. We could have just said, oh, the man has schizophrenia. No, clearly this is a mental health issue. It's not paranormal, but it really was much more complicated than that.
Which actually brings us to Jillian Louise's question. She's curious about the link between mental health, the paranormal, and crime. And we have a medical consultant with the foundation who works up in Canada. And she worked in a mental health institution for the criminally insane. And she reported to me constantly about paranormal phenomena that would take place around them. Again, it's that negativity. It's that extraordinary mind that can move that energy in one way or another. There was another thing I wanted to circle back to.
Can I interject real quick? One second.
Of course.
Okay, so we all agree that I'm not near as good as Heather at doing this, correct?
No,
you're great.
You're doing great. You're doing great.
You're equally wonderful.
So I posted a link that does not say what it was for. What that link was for that I put in the comment section was if anybody does need help with anything, it's the link to contact us. So I just wanted everybody to know what that link was that I put in there. So sorry for interrupting, but I needed to clear that up because it doesn't say what it's for. It's just a link.
One of the things that I have found most disturbing isn't, and I believe it was Cleo that mentioned something similar. There was a point where we had like 3 different parents who had contacted us because their children were on the autistic spectrum, and they were certain that it was paranormal. And they wanted us to cure their child of their autism. No. First off, people on the autistic spectrum can be extraordinarily gifted. They can have amazing psychic gifts as well, and they can manifest things. Not all of them, but it is possible and more likely with them. If I were to give my own personal opinion, I think people on the autistic spectrum are probably the next step in our evolution, and a good step in the right direction. So that externalizing of what is actually going on is a horrifying phenomena that we see all the time. Not paranormal, but it is horrible. Catherine Rogers who I had the opportunity to actually meet in Orlando, she's made a couple of really wonderful comments here. One of them is, being a Christian and a student in seminary, she felt like she was putting her gift on the side because had been taught that it was all demonic, and demonic oppression was what was causing her chronic depression. So first off, if you're a psychic and you're a Christian, then look in the Bible. It is one of the gifts of the Holy Spirit, according to Christianity. All right. There's nothing demonic about that. And there's nothing you should be ashamed of. For far too many years, we have suppressed our own gifts. My grandmother, when her abilities first manifested, a nun told her, "Shh, we don't talk about those things." You know, and I have heard that from pretty much anybody who's over 20 years old, that they were told, we don't talk about that. Don't talk about that. Hide that. Oh no, it's not real. And what we're really doing is we're blinding our children. They have gifts. Let's encourage those gifts. We have 2 psychic support groups to help people who have these gifts. One is in English, one is in Spanish. If you're interested, contact us and we'll happily bring you into the fold. And everything we do is free and confidential. Father Ken, you want to read that one and address it?
So I'm a licensed counselor in Maryland. I worry about advertising my openness to the paranormal because of how other counselors may view it. So Jacqueline, I believe, Jacqueline Bisco, hopefully I'm not messing up your name. You know what? Don't be ashamed, all right? Be who you are. Use the gifts and use the abilities that you have. You have been given an opportunity to have a gift. You have also been given an opportunity to be licensed by your state, where you work at, where you live at, to be able to help other people. It would be a disservice for you to not be able to help other people. So don't worry about what other people think about it. Don't worry about what other counselors think. You have a wonderful opportunity and a wonderful advantage to actually separate yourself and distinguish yourself from the other counselors, because you have a certain ability that others don't. You have an openness. There's a sensitivity and there's a gentleness to you that you carry with these abilities. And as a counselor, and please don't be ashamed. Don't be ashamed. Go for it. Please go for it.
I agree with that.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think we need almost a list of counselors that are actually open to, hearing about the paranormal, because I think a lot of counselors do what she says and they discount it, and they, you're a freak and you're a bad doctor if you don't, if you acknowledge that the paranormal actually happens. So, that is a very important point. And we would love to hear from people that are actually licensed physicians and psychiatrists and things like that, so we can put you on a list of people to recommend our clients to if we need to.
Well, because the thing is with that is, you look at the natural science behind it is there were conflicting studies among psychologists that a person who has certain abilities or experienced the paranormal was under some form of psychosis. That is now not true. It's been over 20, 30 years in study. There was a research that was done in Switzerland where a woman had empathetic abilities, and she sensed her husband was going through something. So she made the phone call. He didn't answer. 2 days later, the hospital called. He had a heart attack. She's already told the doctor, the psychiatrist, that she had these abilities. Full thorough evaluation concluded that there was nothing mentally wrong with her. And the doctor did conclude that she indeed had some empathetic and psychic abilities. So the notion is, and it's a negative notion, that if you're a psychologist, a therapist, that if you have these abilities, that you're under some form of psychosis, that you're mental, that you're delusional, that you're deranged. That's not true.
No, and you know what? And this is something, by the way, when you're watching my grandparents' old videos, you should keep in mind. This is a field of research. So is psychology. So is any science. And things change over time. If you're not open-minded, then you're just a religious follower. and you're not going to be able to adapt, and you're not going to be able to accept new information. And as a counselor, your openness to look at the paranormal, that's a beautiful thing, because it is real, regardless of what it is. For me, most of it's quantum physics. It's how my mind needs to look at it. But that's me. Is that a religious problem I'm having? Perhaps. I try to stay as open as possible.
Well, that's the problem with religion, though. But that's the problem with. But I was going to say that's the problem with religion. Like, I don't do religion. The problem with religion is that it sets you aside and it keeps you in a linear way of thinking. You know, I always tell to people who I counsel is like, I don't do religion. All right, just do your faith, practice your faith, and practice what you believe in. A true connection with the Creator. You know, because if you're always constantly following the church legalism, which, if anyone doesn't know, legalism is just a way that man uses the Bible to control you. They control your thoughts and they control their narrative of what they want you to believe of how God is. And that's not the way it is. So don't fall into the church legalism, and don't fall under those false narratives under religion. Religion in itself is vast and it's beautiful once you study it, but once you understand it, you have to have a discernment and a keen understanding of it. Because if you just read it, this is going to seem like mundane rules, and it's going to be easier for people to control you if you don't understand it.
Amen. Bill, I want to hit you with this one here. This is Nicole Lynn. Can demonic entities influence people who have poor mental health? I'm a hobbyist investigator and have done tours in St. Augustine, Florida for the paranormal. And this is something I thought about and hope wasn't happening.
Well, I mean, in my case, I believe it can. It's so rare. It is very rare, but it is a possibility. You know, like we were talking about before. You know, it's not something you run into every day, and I wouldn't say it's something you need to worry about all the time, especially as, you know, being a new investigator and everything. But it's something to be aware of, and to be kind of learn about it a little bit, and learn what to do and what to know and how to protect yourself and all that, because it definitely is out there. I mean, I've been involved in cases. It's definitely out there, but I wouldn't say you have to worry about it all the time.
Nicole's such a lovely person. We actually got a chance to meet her a few weeks ago at the Hopewell Theater in Virginia. If I believe that she was there. But yeah, I mean, it's true what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, it's true what you're saying. You know, and the thing is, and I've been counseled on certain things, and I'm going to take that advice. Demonic possession. All right, I'm not going to give you numbers. It's a very low percentage. Okay, for the conversation.
Yeah.
Very low percentage, Chris, for our car ride. You know, I don't want to get statistics and probable stats. That's easy for everyone. It's a very low percentage. Okay, it's highly rare that you're going to come across demonic possession. What you might come across is an infestation, and even that is a small percentage as well.
And I actually think that's a really important point. And I probably have far less experience than a lot of people here. I've been doing this for probably over a decade now. And yeah, the risk of, encountering a demon is, almost infinitesimally small, unless you're kind of going out there almost looking for it. Having said that, if you are going into haunted locations, or suspected haunted locations, or locations that have a history of kind of a dark past. And when I say dark past, it could be an old psychiatric hospital or an old prison or somewhere like that, where there has been, maybe, a lot of people, I choose my words carefully, taking their own life, or, people with poor mental health, or people suffering, that can attract, negative entities to those places. And so while I think that Bill and Father Ken are exactly right in what they're saying, that you really, probably don't really need to be overly concerned about demonic presences affecting you. Absolutely, there are other things out there that can and will attach themselves to the vulnerable and the unprepared and the unwary. And if you're out there and you're goading spirits and you're teasing and lots of different things can cause this. I mean, heaven knows I have taken home something nasty from a cleansing, which I did, and it wreaked absolute havoc in my house for one night only until I got rid of it. But we always take steps to protect ourselves before an investigation, and we always cleanse ourselves afterwards. And I can't emphasize that enough, because I know people who have been working in the paranormal field for a long time, and they're not the same person that they used to be anymore. Now, whether
I don't know
because,
who you might be thinking of.
whether that's because they have changed as a person because of, I don't know, ego or age or whatever it happens to be, or whether that is the influence of things which they have got attached to themselves, because the person I'm thinking of doesn't necessarily believe in a lot of this stuff, even though they're interested in it, and they don't take steps to protect beforehand or to cleanse afterwards. And so they could actually have quite a lot of stuff attached to them that's following them around and influencing. So, no, don't lose sleep over demonic entities. But if you are going to go into, potentially paranormal locations, make sure that you are taking proper steps to look after yourself and anybody that's with you as well. We do public investigations sometimes as fundraising events for venues, and we will offer cleansings afterwards to people. We don't want people taking stuff home. I mean, it's going to be me that has to shoot across the country to go and help somebody out when they have a problem. So,
I've actually got a funny story about what you just said. So we did a public investigation this weekend, and my wife Dana, who is a member of the foundation, was offering to cleanse people with sage and do a little blessing on them before they left, so they wouldn't take anything home. And this lady's sitting off to the sideline. She's like, "I demand you in the name of Christ to be gone. You will not follow these people home." And she's like trying to perform this like exorcism on this whole line of people. And I was just like, "Oh my goodness."
It's funny that this perfectly fits in with something Allison Payne is saying, that her house, the spirits at her home are loving animals and people that give her no problems. She has set boundaries so they know where they can and can't go. And that's exactly what we're talking about here. Mm-hmm. If you don't set the boundaries, then they can do whatever they want to do. And every single religion I've studied, every single one of them has different ways of setting spiritual boundaries. So keep that in mind when you're dealing with the paranormal. If you're an enthusiast who likes to go to these haunted locations, be very, very careful and set those boundaries yourself. Use whatever ritual works for you, whatever you have faith in, because it's all about your faith and your intention. The ritual only focuses those things.
Can I shift it to this question? Because I've actually never heard about this, and I wonder what you guys think about this.
Jeff, hang on one second. I just want to add one more thing before we
Okay. Yep. Go ahead.
Just to give people an idea, I've been doing this for about 34 years. I've been involved in hundreds and hundreds of cases. I have been involved in 6 cases that were considered demonic. None of them were actual possessions. They were infestations. 2 of them were a surprise, and 4 of them I was called into. I have never encountered anything demonic going out on a public investigation. Although we do protect ourselves, and you should always protect yourself and be prepared, but I have never seen it in anything like that. It's normally going after a specific person or a household or something. I've never just seen it hanging around in an abandoned location. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Yep, good point. So yeah, Catherine wants to know, she says, "I do have a question, hope it makes sense. How does medication work with psychic abilities?"
It absolutely can suppress them. Okay. Or drugs can also open up your third eye and expose you to things. But this is why things like ayahuasca or other medicinal hallucinogens should only be used with somebody who really knows what they're doing, like a shaman. A guided voyage, psychic voyage, can be a beautiful experience. But if you're doing it without those boundaries set, without knowing where to go, then you're just wandering in the wilderness by yourself, and you can get eaten.
Yeah, I mean, and that in itself, could lead to a plethora of a lot of effects. I mean, you could get really mentally ill. You can ideally now come under some type of influence, or you can have a really bad high, really bad trip and become really ill, or you can overdose. So it's always important that you take care of yourself and that you do these things properly. But absolutely, medications can suppress your abilities.
I think same question. There's a very famous psychic medium in New Zealand called Kelvin Cruikshank, and he talks about that in his first book. So obviously when he was very young and his psychic abilities were first developing, everybody thought that he was mentally ill, and he ended up institutionalized and heavily medicated, and his body's reactions to these medications actually nearly killed him. It was very, very serious. And it wasn't until he got out of that kind of hospital environment and came off the medication, he really realized what was happening. I was talking with a Maori gentleman several years ago. Actually, we had gone to do an investigation in his home and had some really interesting chats with him. And he said they see it very often on the marae, where if you have, some Maori.
For people who don't know, the Maori are the indigenous people of New Zealand.
Yes, thank you, Chris. This is their land. They are very connected to the land and to the spirits of the land, and the spiritual culture of the land, I think, would be a good way of describing it. And clearly, as in any society, some people are particularly gifted. And he said it has often been the case where these particularly gifted people, again, have been institutionalized, heavily medicated. It's made them very ill. He said, but then when they get back to the marae, and the marae is kind of like the, I suppose it would almost be like a church, but it looked like a kind of spiritual home where people would meet and gather and that kind of thing. When they get back there amongst their own people and without the medication, their gifts become apparent, and then they're no longer considered to be sick. They are actually just psychic. Having said that, if you do have a diagnosed mental illness, you should take your medication if it is prescribed to you. And I would be very cautious about refusing medication that is prescribed to you simply because you're concerned about your psychic gifts, because it could be very dangerous not to take prescribed medication simply because of that. And I think as well, those are conversations which you should feel that you can have openly with your mental health care provider, that, tell them that you have abilities. If you feel that your medication is perhaps helping your mental health but impacting that, see if there's another brand of medication that you can switch to. See if you can change the dose of your medication. Perhaps you're on too high a dose. But there has to, I think it's important to emphasize that you must prioritize your mental health over your psychic abilities. Once your mental health has been addressed, the psychic abilities can always be worked on again later. But not addressing mental health issues can be life-threatening.
Amen.
But losing your psychic abilities will not threaten your life.
Right.
I would like to add something to that. Just bouncing off what Cleo had mentioned. If you're an individual that has abilities and you're struggling with the idea of like trusting your healthcare provider, your mental health provider, view them as I view them. I believe, in my whole heart, I believe that mental health professionals and doctors are also gifted individuals who have a divine gift to help heal your physical and your spiritual mind. So that's how I view them. So if we're going to talk in metaphysical sense, supernatural sense, think of a doctor or think of a mental health provider as a person who has been given a gift to help keep you fine-tuned with your physical and your mental side. There's nothing absolutely wrong with seeking therapy and taking medications. I take medications. I am a veteran. I have been injured in war. I've seen really bad things. And yes, I am a doctor and I do all of these different things and I'm a chaplain, but I still go to counseling. All right, because counselors need counselors as well. I still take my medications. I live a healthy life. I eat, I work out, I exercise. So let's talk about the other stuff. Mental health is not only just taking the medications. The mental health, it's all about mind, body, and soul, and connection to the ground, the land, creator. Live a good, healthy life. Have fun. Live, laugh, joy, express. Do things that are gonna make your heart rate go up. Do things that are going to challenge you mentally in a positive way. Things that are going to make you think. Things that are going to make you, wow, there's a beautiful world out there. All of these things also involve mental health, not just the medication. We're not saying be a zombie and just sit there and take your medication and pump all the pills and not be productive. That's not what we're saying. Because if that was the case, then this would be an injustice, and there's no reason for this show right now.
Yeah, there's many different medications for each type of illness. If one you're taking may not agree with you in the same way, like you said, talk to somebody and maybe change the dose, change the type of medication and see how it affects you. But you should definitely take something if you're prescribed. When you look into it as maybe there's a different, medication that will work with you better.
And Kenneth's point, I think, is really important. That being in nature, exercising, eating properly, all of these things will impact your mental health as well. And I think that when people are struggling with their mental health, and also when they're struggling with the paranormal, either individually or together, it can be very easy to isolate yourselves from others and to shut down and to lose those connections with other people. And I think as well that maintaining those connections, spending time with your friends, spending time with your family, and talking to them openly and honestly about the struggles that you're experiencing, whether they be paranormal or whether they be mental health struggles. I think that's really important. We all need to learn to share openly with others, because it's part of that connection that we have with other people. And in sharing openly, it encourages others to do the same. And also it helps us to get the love and the support that we need as human beings.
Yeah.
It's very true. Well said, sister.
Yeah.
I agree. We've got a number of our members online as well. And they're making some wonderful comments. So if you're not following the comments, you really should. And one of our directors, he's our director for our new Department of Extraterrestrial Investigations and Extra-Dimensional Investigations, Sam Torville.
Transdimensional.
Yeah, he's got a very long.
Yeah,
long
I never get it
cool
right.
title.
Leave me alone. I'm an old man. I've been up since 4 a.m.
His title is very prestigious. It's way better than the rest of ours.
He's over here messaging me, trying to make me laugh. He's trying
But
to drive me
if he wants to join us, he's more than welcome. Or Francis McNeil can join us, or Rosanna Brookhauser. These are wonderful members, and they have certainly got plenty to offer to this discussion.
If you guys want to join us, send me a message and I'll send you the link.
Yeah, I mean, the more people, the better. I mean, so, we're talking about the mental health and we're talking about the paranormal. What are like some of the isms? What are some misconceived notions that you guys have heard about the paranormal and psychology? What's your take? I mean, the main one for me is always just the psychosis or being schizophrenic. What are your thoughts?
Here's actually a question related from one of the guests. As a therapist, I'm asked often around the link confusion about demonic possession and schizoid affective disorders. What are your thoughts on this?
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, I've been wanting to post that for about 10 minutes.
That's kind of a timely question at the moment.
Very fine line. Yeah. Very fine line, because demonic possession can mimic schizophrenia, and schizophrenia can mimic demonic possession. But demonic possession is highly rare. So I'm always going to go on the side with medicine. And that's where my take on that is.
And I'd like to I'd like to take this in a little different direction with this question. This is really for a lot of people out there that maybe are into doing what we do. Maybe they're just public investigators right now. They want to get into residential, things like that. This is very important things to learn. Learn about the mental health, learn about all this, because if you go to somebody and let's say they don't know they're schizophrenic, or let's say they are and they don't want to tell you, the stuff they're going to tell you, if you don't know about it, you're going to be like right away, okay, there's a haunting in there. Something's going on because they're hearing voices. They're seeing shadows. The voices are talking to them. And how do you distinguish the difference? Because they're not lying to you. They're really hearing voices. If they're schizophrenic, they're hearing the voices. The voices are telling them stuff. So it's about learning like what the difference is, because in my opinion, I've learned in many cases, you learn kind of the difference of when somebody may be on the schizophrenic side or any kind of mental disorder, as opposed to like a demon or a haunting or anything like that. Because I've had people tell me, like I had an old lady that contacted us, and she definitely had Alzheimer's or dementia, and it was heartbreaking. But she was telling me that there were ghosts in her house. They were in 3 shifts, and they were running a restaurant, and there's people sitting there waiting to be served, and she doesn't know what to do. And they tapped into her the fire alarm, and they were using that to make phone calls and run up her phone bill. So these things she truly believes 100%. You're not going to change her mind, so you need to learn a little bit about both sides, because if you go in there not knowing anything about mental health, and you then tell this person that they may have a demon or they may be possessed or anything like that, you can seriously damage them.
Could I add something?
I need to put a powerful caveat here as well, though. I'm a professional therapist. It is not in my wheelhouse to diagnose, and neither should any of us. Our job is, if we suspect mental illness,
Right,
that we have an evaluation done, and that's what anybody should do. It isn't wrong. It isn't wrong to, we're not saying, oh, you've got this psychosis,
right.
therefore it cannot be paranormal. No, actually, it's far more likely that it's paranormal because of the psychosis. A normal, ordinary person without any underlying issues is probably not going to have a negative haunting. So we need to identify those things that are making you vulnerable. So it is part of our responsibility to you to bring you to the right people to get the right evaluation, so we can deal with the whole picture.
Exactly.
We take a holistic approach, because you can't treat cancer by bandaging your thumb. We have to deal with all of you.
Well, and I like to take that an extra step. You have to look at both ends of the spectrum as well. We talk about schizophrenia, we talk about psychosis, and it seems to be the term that everyone is interested in demonic possession. For me, as an exorcist and having some experience, I've only been doing this for about 15 years. What I will tell you is, if you think a person has schizophrenia, want to make sure you get that diagnosed first. But there are some signs that there may be some demonic possession. We talk about an individual that's displaying supernatural strength, an individual that knows things about you that they shouldn't know, a person that has knowledge in the mystical arts and speaks different languages, aversion to religious objects. Now, the aversion to religious objects has also been known to have an effect on people that actually do have true psychological illness, but that's another way to tell if there really is a demonic possession. So we're looking at the natural signs at first, which you always need to get a mental evaluation, but a good investigator is always going to look at the other side. Okay, what can I prove physically? If you have these supernatural side effects that are happening and you can document them, then chances are that it is not schizophrenia, that it is a true demonic possession. But once again, everyone, it is rare. I implore everyone, please get the word demon out of your brain, out of your mouth. You don't want to deal with the demon. You don't want to deal with that. Yeah, you don't want to deal with the person suffering. You don't want to see a person in pain. You don't want to see a person being subjugated and tortured all the time with lashes and marks over their body. You don't want to subjugate yourself to the psychological and physical damage that you're going to receive yourself. So let's please remove the demon. There is this whole infatuation with the word demon, and it annoys me because Hollywood has put such a stigma on it that now everyone that's an investigator is looking for a demon. No, I assure you, from the bottom of my heart, you do not want to deal with the demon. It is not fun. It is not cool. It doesn't matter how many books you read. And not only that, you go into the stigma of, okay, now I'm going to be an exorcist. Okay, well, you have to have a spiritual standing. You have to have a good psychological background. You have to get religious. There's so many things that encompass in being an exorcist, or a person that even deals with, spiritual deliverance, or a person that's of the cloth. It's so broad. So please, let's just get that whole demon thing out of our mouths, please.
Now that we've addressed demons so wonderfully, let's bring Sam Torval into the
That's what I was
conversation.
just going to say. First of all, I disagree, Ken. All you need is $50 and 15 minutes online, and I can be a demonologist in 15 minutes.
Well, that's true. You can take a test
kidding, brother.
Well, you could take a test online and become possessed, and
this is true too. But yeah, I did want to hear. Sam obviously wanted to jump in and join us. So, what did you have to add, Sam? Was there something specific you wanted to chime in on, or just your general thoughts?
I didn't jump in specifically for demons. I don't have experience with that, but
right.
In my opinion, Father Ken is absolutely right. It's a very rare occurrence, and unfortunately, because of Hollywood, it has become something that everybody's looking at. But I would say a combination of religion and Hollywood, because in at least Christian religions, demons have been the go-to throughout history for unusual behavior. Now, that being said, I think there's a large variety of dark entities that people confuse as demons. To me, and I'm sorry, I came in late. I came in about 15, 20 minutes late. So did we actually define what a demon is yet?
No, at this time we haven't defined. Well, we all gave I think Chris gave an interpretation of his thoughts on demons, but not what it actually is per se in detail.
Okay, so
what are your thoughts?
I'd love to hear your definition first, Ken.
So for me, daemon, if we're going to look at it from, a Christian point of view, to me, a demon, what I know to be is an evil entity, a fallen angel that has limited power, that can only afflict a person based on the permission of God, the Creator. And the caveat to that is most of the people who get afflicted by a demon, it's supposed to be for the glory of God, to teach people and to strengthen their faith. I don't really buy all of that hoodoo. I teach and run a seminary program, and my studies as a doctorate in divinity have shown me otherwise. So I'll just keep it minimalistic. I just think it's a fallen angel. And I think they're nothing to be afraid of, respectful of, but nothing to be afraid of. And I think most of the time the demons are just in our head. We make demons up.
I wanted to address something here. My friend Leantha Chavez lost her son 2 years ago. He had a mental health issue. And the police in Texas were not trained. The young man had been down on his knees. He had been tasered multiple times, and they still shot him 29 times on his knees with his hands in the air. She is questioning whether, because he had never acted this way in the past, she's questioning whether or not this could have been something paranormal influencing him. Sadly, psychiatric breaks happen. And I would say that was the more likely explanation, but it certainly doesn't mean that there wasn't something paranormal going on there. It's just right now that isn't going to give you any peace one way or the other. Your son is at peace, and I know how much this has affected you. And God knows I'm so sorry.
I am extremely sorry for your loss, man.
Nancy Teatro says the Warrens couldn't have been more Christian. However, were they not also most psychically gifted? My grandfather had no gifts whatsoever, none. But my grandmother, yeah, she was absolutely an extraordinary psychic. We could get into some case studies here, but I hesitate to do that because the ones that are in my mind right now are ongoing.
I've got one if you'd like to bring one up.
Oh, sure. Yeah, if you've got a past one that we don't have to.
This one is in the process of getting terminated. What I will say is that the client is a therapist, and they suffered a very tremendous loss. They moved into a home, and their partner was a habitual drug abuser, and they were known to commit domestic violence against their other partners. And so they moved into this house, and in this house, allegedly, there was something awry, some type of demonic activity. And so this demonic activity caused this individual to douse their 2-year-old son and light him on fire with gasoline and kill him.
Jesus.
And so the child died. The person is in prison. And because of that, the oldest brother, he is now under state conservatorship, because he has been found walking the streets of this town previously, years ago, talking in different languages. But I wholeheartedly think that it was the trauma that he suffered. He actually saw his dad light the 2-year-old son, his 2-year-old brother, on fire with gasoline and kill him. Now, the clients report that there is some activity there. Last we spoke was a little over a month ago. We did our thing. We had a conversation with them. Everything is good. No activity. So I'm beginning to think that a lot of it was self-manifestation due to the trauma that they've suffered, because this client is also a therapist and they deal with children that suffer trauma as well. And I'll leave it at that.
I wouldn't mind putting my opinion out there on that. The thought that came to my head as you were saying that was that, and especially when you talked about him speaking in different languages, the thought that came to me was that because of that trauma, it's possible that he had, I don't know how you would call it, maybe a spiritual separation, where his spirit separated enough from his body that it was able to access information from previous or possibly future lifetimes to gain that knowledge. And I don't see any reason for there to be any sort of attachment to cause that particular phenomenon.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's deep. I mean, we're dealing with a lot of trauma there, and even the evidence that they try to tell me, they show. I mean, it hasn't been substantial. I mean, it's been personal experiences, but I mean, even with that, it's like, what do we do with this? I mean, is it something that they've created on their own? Because we talk about demons, but we're also talking about the mental health. Chris had mentioned earlier in the program that there is the egregore, an energy that's self-manifested. So are we dealing with that, or is this truly a demonic infestation? I don't think it is, but that just goes to show the power of the mind and how trauma can deeply affect an individual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I personally think that a lot of hauntings are actually egregores or poltergeist activity that is manifested by someone with abilities, usually not knowing that they have abilities, and are in an extreme emotional state.
Can I ask a question for all of you?
Yeah.
There seems to be a big connection too with autistic children. and paranormal cases. Do you guys experience the same thing? And what's your thoughts on that? That would be my question.
I brought that up a little while ago, as a matter of fact.
Yep.
Poltergeist cases often include people on the autistic spectrum. Cleo?
You're muted.
We can't hear you. No, we can't hear you at all for some reason. I saw you trying to speak earlier, and we couldn't hear you either. No,
Probably the ghost.
Maybe you should pop out and pop back in. We'll get back. We'll get your answer after. Come back in after you pop out. Who would like to try to take this on? Bill? Bill, are you there? Hello, Bill. All right, let's move on.
All right, Father Ken. Or
Ken,
Sam, yes.
Somebody.
Yes. So yeah, I mean, I do think that children that are on the spectrum that are autistic can have abilities, can display activities, poltergeist, all that stuff. Yeah, I'm okay with that. I agree with it. Most of our cases, with children, have shown that most of them are on the spectrum, and a lot of activity has been surrounded because there are children that are autistic or are on that spectrum. So I think it's highly possible, and I've seen it.
Yeah, I think it's very possible as well. One of the common features of autistic children is they don't really have control, or they don't have as much control over their emotions. Their emotional maturity is quite low. One of the precursors of poltergeist activity is a high emotional state. You combine that with a separation from reality, which, I mean, that's one way of putting it. The other way of putting that would be, how am I trying to say this? The ability for the consciousness to separate from the body. So in one way, in autism, it can be seen as a negative thing because they're not in reality. But in spiritual circles, that's something that we strive to achieve through meditation.
Yep.
So
I've heard people say that, the autistic children are the normal people and we're abnormal because we limit ourselves in our thoughts and all this other stuff. So I've heard a lot of people actually say that. Cleo, can you talk yet?
Oh, I can speak.
Yes.
I don't know whether you can hear me.
We can hear you now. We're good. We're good. We got you back.
Yay. What I was going to say when Chris saw my lips moving, but nobody could hear what I was saying. That in my experience has been that demons are not the only possessing entities. That I've had one experience of a case of possession during my time as a paranormal investigator, and the possessing entity actually took possession of the person who was being haunted, and it was actually during a cleansing that I was doing, which is like, we always insist that children are not in the house now, and when it wasn't a child, I'm happy to say, but we insist that children are out of the home, and in fact, if everybody can be out of the home, so much the better, because there is a risk. Another paranormal team in New Zealand had a case of possession during a cleansing. There was actually one of the investigators that was affected, but in neither case was the possessing entity demonic. It was actually the remains of a human spirit that was literally jumping into a person to try and escape being banished from the property.
Just like last week, Leo, we were at the Beacon Theater. Chris, you had more of an experience with the butcher, and so did you, Jeff. Can you guys elaborate more about that? How the feeling overall was?
Actually, it wasn't me. It was Joe.
It was Joe, right? Were you?
And me.
Yeah,
I was
Chris
the one
and Joe.
that had the first confrontation with him, because that was the first place we went that evening. We called this gentleman the butcher. He was performing illegal abortions, and I don't really have a problem with abortion. What I have a problem with is this guy. He is long dead, but and this is going to sound like something out of Hollywood. He had trapped other spirits, other women around him by convincing them that he had control of their babies' souls, and that if they did anything that he didn't want, he would destroy those souls.
Wow.
And the first soul that we had encountered was a nurse who felt very trapped and wanted to pass over, but was terrified. We helped her to pass over, and then he smugly started attacking some of the people in the room with me. He wasn't going near me, and I helped protect the people. I helped teach them how to use the white light, and we got rid of this guy. He was very smug, though. I even offered to help him, but he was like, "What are you going to do about the others?" And that's when we realized there are more souls here that we need to help. And we started, and they were terrified. They were crying. They were hurting. All of the women in my group started crying at one point all together. It was extraordinary. One of the men was getting choked, and we were using an Estes, which is a blind test where someone is using headphones and they're hearing answers come through a machine while we're asking questions. He can't hear us, but he can shout out the answers he's getting. So when we start getting intelligent answers, that's when we know we're dealing with a real spirit. And this guy had convinced these women so completely, but when we finally got through to them, you could hear the children calling out, telling their mothers, come on, it's okay, come on. And there was laughter. And the women started howling in rage. And he knew he was in trouble. And it was the most extraordinary thing. All of a sudden, all of us started singing Amazing Grace all at once, just spontaneously. And the light was extraordinary. They all passed over. Now, we didn't get every single soul, but we got all the ones that we were able to contact that evening. So it was a wonderful experience, actually.
We helped one cross over. What was a beautiful lady, Maurice Theriault's cousin? She was with me.
Yeah.
So we helped cross over a young woman. Her name was Sophia. Her herself, she was a spirit that was trapped there because she was being abused by the men, and she was still under a stronghold of the doctor, the butcher. And so we went, we prayed. I prayed for her. I gave her last rites. I gave her confession, and she crossed over. It was such a beautiful experience.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with religion and how religion can affect your mind. You know, you get controlled under this false narrative. So now you have this mindset that you just don't know how to break out of. And it inhibits your spiritual growth and your physical growth. So please be careful with how religion is taught. I talk to me. I'm more open.
Can I answer?
Oh, go right ahead.
I was just going to, Chrissy just popped up with a question there, and she just asked what the difference was between a malevolent spirit compared to something that was demonic. So in my experience with this possession, it was in fact, it was a human ghost, I guess, a human spirit, what we would call a ghost. And I mean, he was, I'll watch my language, but he was pretty annoyed about the fact that, you know, this is the problem with cleansing a property that actually does have a genuine haunting. You know, if it, you know, a lot of cases, paranormal cases, it's just kind of bad vibes, and it's really easy to deal with that kind of thing. If you want to start trying to shift a human spirit out of a place, it's a lot more challenging. You need to have a lot more strings to your bow, because you're going to have to use some different approaches, because, you know, as Chris says, they have free will. They can choose to stay. You know, you're kind of asking them nicely, and they're just going to cross their arms and go, nope, I'm not going anywhere. So the technique that I was using, the ritual that I was using, really doesn't give them any choice. It is literally forcing them out, and his only option was to hide inside somebody. So to speak to that a bit more fully, if you were a nasty, horrible person in real life and you die and you leave your spirit behind, your body died, but you're still a nasty, horrible person after death too, unless, you know, you realize the error of your ways and become contrite and, you know, and change your attitude. And I believe that, you know, does happen. Some people hang around and want to apologize or somehow, you know, make things right. But in general, if you were a nasty, horrible person in life and you become a ghost, the situation remains unchanged. And that really would be a malevolent spirit. The ghost of a nasty person, that's one example.
That's exactly what I was going to add before you said it. We tell people that all the time. If they were a real nasty person in life, what makes them different in the spirit world? They're probably even more pissed now.
Amen.
Yeah, I mean, and
Yep.
according to Christian theology and Abrahamic belief systems, a demon is an entity that's never walked the earth. That's not including a jinn. Okay, jinn are different in nature, so please don't think that jinn are demons. So in Islamic belief systems, they are a neutral entity. Most people confuse jinns with demons. The subcategorization is a demon, but Abrahamic Christian theology, a demon is a spirit that's never walked this earth. But we have dominion over them.
So
Not
now
like
I'm going to flip the table over and go a little deeper. Addressing both what was just asked and Cindy Giles saying, as a therapist, I am asked often around the link confusion around demonic possession and schizoid affective disorders. First off, for anybody who hasn't seen me speak before, I travel all around the world learning. And one thing I've learned is these things, these malevolent entities, manifest according to our cultural and spiritual beliefs. So for a Christian, they're going to be a fallen angel. But for many, many other religions, they're not. As a matter of fact, the original meaning of demon or daemon was a heavenly messenger, a go-between between the gods and people. It wasn't necessarily evil. Or there are Hindu demons and Buddhist demons. They're not evil per se. Some of them are actually messengers of the gods, or even a carrier of the gods, like Garuda in Hindu mythology or belief systems, excuse me. But what that says to me is these manifestations come from us. Why are they more bound to our beliefs when we say this is what you will do, and they have to do it? Whereas a human spirit has free will and can't do that, or can do whatever it wants. I mean, to me, that's because we're manifesting these entities. It's us. It's our energy. It's our underlying negativity that's manifesting this horrifying entity and creating a thought form that takes on a life of its own. When we don't control it, it does get out of control. That's what an egregore can do, or a tulpa. The same thing, different names for it. So that's my deeper dive into this. It was important to me that I address this with you because we are talking about mental illness today. And I see us all talking about demons. I'm an exorcist. I've done 6 or 7 exorcisms in my life, and I've assisted on a few others. But I don't believe in demons. At least not the demon Beelzebub, Astaroth, Asmodeus, what have you. Because I know the history of how these things gradually, through hundreds and thousands of years, have taken on those identities. They didn't have those identities when they first existed. They were gods in Sumer, in Mesopotamia, in Babylonia. During the time when the Jews were in Babylon, they took some of those gods and turned them into their demons. This is where they come from. This is the reality. So again, when you get bogged down in religion, you sometimes close yourself off from what might actually be there. Now, I will leave it for everyone else to tear me apart.
No, I agree with you.
I think it's a really interesting point. I was just going to mention, for example, Kali and Rahu, who are two deities that are viewed as demonic by certain people of certain spiritual beliefs, usually in certain countries. But, other people, work with Kali or work with Rahu and use them to their advantage. So, yeah, just different perspectives. Sorry, Ken, I interrupted
No, I mean,
you.
I was going to say, I believe that people believe in other gods as well, because when we look at biblical interpretation, which is what I studied, biblical interpretation, the commandments say, "Thou shalt have no other god before me." That doesn't imply that there isn't only one God. That means that there are other gods. Do not worship other gods because I am a jealous God. So that is implying that in theology, biblical scripture, there are other gods. But this is just an ancient Judaic Christian God that we choose to believe in. And so that's why it's important for you to study theology, study world religions, study different things that are going to open your mind. Because don't get me wrong, I love the Bible. I believe the Bible is a living word and breathing word of God, but we'd be fools to not study other literature. That's the beauty of this world. That's the beauty of the mind that we've been given. And once you start comparing, you'll see, oh, you know what? It says this in this certain part of the Bible, but when I look at a different world religion, there's kind of some similarity. So just please be open. Please be open when it comes to learning different religions and cultures.
Well said.
Anyone else?
As it's gone quiet. When you were talking about children with autism, and as we're talking about mental health, just going back to that, there was a case, and I may possibly have mentioned this before, but we did have a case which came up again in South Auckland. There's a lot of stuff that goes on down that way, and it was a family, experiencing what they would describe as poltergeist activity, but as far as they were concerned, it was kind of an external entity that was manifesting it. The situation of the family was that they had a child who had some physical illnesses which affected his brain, and that was affecting his mental health. They were also suffering with having been locked down for a long time through COVID. The child couldn't go to school because in New Zealand all of the schools were shut. The mum was stuck at home with the child for a long time, and this kind of explosive situation developed whereby it was almost like a pressure cooker where the mum had suffered with her own mental health and with her own past trauma, and they had a boy who was not able to go to school. He was suffering with his physical and mental health as well. And really what was happening, we believe, was that all of the activity was true poltergeist activity, in that it was being manifested by either the son or the mother or both in combination as a result of this situation that they were in. And again, this is how mental health can feed into paranormal activity. Sorry, that was totally off topic.
Well,
We were just talking about.
Actually, I want to add about that. There's been a lot of studies about poltergeist activity being connected to teenagers in the home, especially female teenagers going through puberty, and the energy shift in the house is so big that it causes poltergeist activity. Now, if you take somebody who happens to be autistic or maybe has a mental, illness or something, that's going to increase it. There's been a lot of studies on that where, a lot of poltergeist activity is caused by that.
Well, in today's, construct of society, we are seeing that post COVID, we have dealt with a lot of activity. We have dealt with a lot of cases with people that are suffering from mental illness. We have been subjugated to confinement for almost 2 years, and we've inhibited our social networking. Kids can't hang out with their friends. You can't go to school. I mean, just everyone has been affected by the pandemic that. A few years ago, Chris, was it maybe 2 years ago, we saw a rise in cases. We would get 20, 30 cases a day. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it had to do, and I believe it was surrounded with the pandemic, because we are so stuck in our homes that now there is this anxiety, there's this depression, there's all these things that are building up, and now we're self-manifesting. And so we've had many clients that are like, hey, I think I got a ghost, or I think there's a poltergeist. And when we get down to the root cause of the underlying issue, We tell them to get the proper medical attention, seek the treatment, do certain things, and voila, cases have been resolved.
Yeah.
Mental illness.
COVID brought on a lot of cases. I got a lot of cases during COVID, and like you said, the people being locked up in the home, not being able to go to their doctors, their therapists, to see people. There's so many different things that were involved in there that I definitely saw a huge increase.
Yeah. I think also the spirit world went a little nuts because they were seeing our anxiety and reacting to it. So there was a lot of self-manifestation going on, but there was also a lot of human spirits saying, holy crap, and acting up because you're stuck in the home and you're miserable and angry and scared, and they're just reacting to it as well.
Plus,
energy.
I was going to say plus. Go ahead.
No, go
Sorry.
ahead. I was going to change the subject, so go ahead.
I was just going to say we saw. You also have a lot of people that died suddenly, that didn't even know they died.
Yeah.
They were sick, went into the hospital, and the next day they were on a ventilator, and then they were gone. And there was a lot of belief, a lot of spirits that could have been hanging around, not even realizing what happened.
Yeah. Craig, that's true. COVID changed man's perceptions. I love Craig. Craig is one of our former members, I believe, here for the foundation up in the Washington area. So he's got like some good points. You can also get carried away with spirit activity. Got to walk away and let your mind rest. Yep.
Yeah.
Very crucial.
And we actually counsel all of our members. If you're in a bad frame of mind, if you're not in the right place right now, you shouldn't be going on a case. Mm-hmm. And I'm telling anybody else listening tonight, if that's the case with you, if you've suffered a massive loss recently, lost somebody you love, whatever, if you're depressed, if you're dealing with alcoholism or drug addiction or something, you don't want to be going into a case. You might bring something out that wasn't there before. And if it's a person's home, you're actually exposing them to far more danger.
Well, not only that, it could also trigger the investigator's underlying mental issues. You have to be really careful and cognizant of how you do these things. I mean, you have to take good care of yourself. I mean, I would even suggest don't even do an intake interview. Take some time off because you can be affected, and it doesn't always necessarily mean it's a supernatural affliction. It just means that if you are in a vulnerable state of mind and you go to someone else's house and they are suffering worse than you are, now you're so open, you're so sensitive because you're still getting over your loss, that you're so sympathetic and empathetic to what they're going through, that it's going to bring you down even more, and you're going to get more depressed, you're going to get more anxious, and dare I say, it will bring you to the point of suicidal thoughts, because I've come across investigators and come across people who have not dealt with their traumas, and they go on cases and they want to end it. Okay. If you are right now struggling with suicidal thoughts, please call the National Suicide Hotline, okay? If you need someone to talk to, please reach out, all right? So if you're dealing with mental illness, or to one of us, if you're dealing with anything, please feel free to reach out to one of us. We don't charge, okay? We will give you the best solid advice we can give you. We will put you with resources. We have doctors and psychologists on staff. We have the resources to help you if you're dealing with these things.
You confused Craig Porter with Mark Porter.
Oh, okay. Sorry,
this goes with public too. If you're feeling and you're in that state, don't go to the local abandoned building. It's the same thing. I wouldn't even go on a ghost tour. Don't wait. Get yourself better first.
So I've got a question for all of you, because we've all encountered this. So we've all had these clients that are absolutely obsessed with the fact that they have a haunting, even though it's caused by them. Do you think that obsession can actually create like a mental disorder?
Yes. Yes.
It's
asked and answered.
Yeah.
Well, we need more than just yes if we're gonna.
Which it's like I think it's called an associative personality disorder or associative disorder. One of those things. It can do that. Yes, it sure can. The obsession with the paranormal can be far much more worse than actually dealing with the real haunting. Yeah. And going back to the topic of demons, people are obsessed. There is the obsession with possession. It happens a lot. Yes.
Unfortunately, people are in denial of their own issues. We had a case recently where a woman was blaming her traffic violations on an entity that made her do it. It's like, wait a minute.
Yeah, I mean that
No, we
was
shouldn't laugh. I mean, she believes this.
That's
Right.
You know, it's just it isn't accurate.
Yes, thank you,
No.
Laurie. It was this. Yes, dissociative
Yeah.
personality disorder. Thank you for that. My TBI kicks in sometimes.
Rosanna Brookhauser makes a good point here. Practicing good health habits and getting the proper amount of sleep is so important to your safety when dealing with paranormal. You know, being centered, surrounding yourself with the white light, or however you want to call on your belief in God, your faith, to protect yourself is vitally important. Again, it's about setting those psychic boundaries. That was a little harder than I thought it was going to be to say.
Try saying that 10 times backwards.
I think that, a lot of what we do as well is supporting people, as Ken just said, if you are having problems, reach out to us, not just with the paranormal, with anything that's concerning. We are here to talk to people and to support you. And it's a good part of what we do. I know it forms a large amount of my workload for the foundation, is just really supporting people through these times while they are suffering with their mental health or suffering with a paranormal, and just being there and being available for people to talk to, being somebody to listen, being somebody to care. And often, there are people that don't have anybody else to talk to. And, I consider it a privilege to be present for people. And just going back to what we were talking about, I lost my own father in November last year. And I took a break from the foundation at that time. It wasn't possible for me to care in that way for other people. It wasn't possible for me to help with other people's paranormal cases. I didn't have it in me. I was so consumed with my own situation around that time and afterwards that I knew it was important for me to kind of take a step back. And I really kind of closed myself off to all of that for a time until I felt, resilient again and strong enough to deal with other people's issues, because I felt that I had dealt with my own. I think that's really important for everybody that's in this field, is that really we can only help others once we have helped ourselves. And, I really can't emphasize that enough, because to repress our own emotions and our own suffering or grief or trauma or whatever it is, and focusing on somebody else's issues instead, whilst it may kind of make you feel better, or you might think it makes you feel better temporarily, potentially it could make both of your situations worse, as one of you gentlemen already so rightly said.
Exactly.
Yeah, and there's positive things too. For me, the foundation, everyone in the foundation, wonderful professional experts, and it's good to surround yourself with like-minded individuals, because you have the power of influence, a good influence, because of the foundation. And I know Chris is going to get tired of me saying this, but because of the foundation, I've been able to focus my life. I've been able to help other people in a way that I thought I couldn't. It's given me my purpose. It's given me, the things that I was missing. I've been able to finish my doctorate degree at the same time while helping other people, because I've been surrounded by individuals who are professionals, who are like-minded, and are willing to give their everything to help out the client. So we are family. So everyone in the foundation, everyone on this panel, just everyone know that they are the best of the best. They are the cream of the crop.
I'll second that.
No, I'll never get
seriously,
tired of hearing that, by the way, Ken.
No, I second that. Like, really, like, this sounds stupid, but this is actually my stress reliever, if that makes sense. Doing the foundation's work. I mean, it can cause a lot of stress for sure, but at the same time,
that's only when you're working with Joe Frankie.
Yeah, God, don't even. No, we're not even going to Joe.
He's not here to defend himself.
I'm already scheduled for a phone call after the show.
The Anaconda's not here today.
No, but it is. When you do this type of work, you have to focus 1,000% on it. You cannot think about the bad day you had at work. You can't think about your dog that's at the vet. You can't think about any of that bull crap. You're focused on this, and that's so I second what Ken said.
Yeah.
Listen, I really want to get to somebody's question here. It's important. Lisa Bernard, it's right here at the end. I've been hearing a lot about poltergeist. I have 3 teens, all of whom have psychic abilities. Their friends who come over also see and hear things. How do I distinguish between poltergeist and other paranormal activity?
It's a good question.
That's a tough one, isn't it?
Here's my quick answer. There's no reason to differentiate. It is paranormal.
Yeah.
Poltergeist activity is paranormal activity. I hate labels, to be quite honest with you. What is important is dealing with the issue. Now, is something negative happening? Are we dealing with just like noises or things knocking off of shelves? You know, that could be random psychic abilities kicking in and somebody is upset and they move something. I've had amazing poltergeist activity happen around me. I mean, extraordinary, happen to me. And sometimes it can be very dangerous because when a person is out of control with their abilities, when they don't have the guidance they need, then they can manifest their random emotions. And if a random emotion happens to be anger and fury, then they might levitate you over the stairs or might throw you across the room. So yeah, absolutely, it's something that would be addressed. And if you need
I
help,
would say, Lisa, yeah, is a message us.
I would say
I think
to distinguish
I
between
was-
the two, observe. Like, is one of your teenagers or more than one of your teenagers agitated, and when that happens, is that when the activity increases?
well, she followed it up here. She said there are noises, seeing things outside, people knocking on doors. My daughter did have one situation where she felt something pushed her on the steps.
And again, observe your teenagers. Is the activity ramping up when there's a lot of drama going on in the house? And if that's the case, then now you know you don't have to deal with external entities. You have to deal with your teenagers.
Yeah, I mean, I would say too, how long, I'd go more in depth, how long has the activity been happening? Who else is experiencing it? Are there, the chemical, hormonal, puberty changes that are happening within the household? Was there a recent high school breakup, boyfriend, girlfriend, one of those things? You have to look at all of these underlying factors. So it's kind of hard to make a sound judgment right now on the live. So I would just implore you to message us personally, and we'd be happy to help you out free of charge.
does the activity happen in the home when the teenagers aren't there? Does the activity happen outside the home? If the teenagers are present, is it following the people, or is it confined to the home? And does it happen with or without their presence? I think,
Although I would
for us, actually,
I would be cautious with that, because I think that the energy of the teenagers can stay in the home even when they're gone. So it's possible that activity could continue even though the teenagers aren't in the home, because their energy is still there within the home.
Absolutely.
But definitely, observe the kids and see if there's the correlation between stressors, emotional outbursts, that sort of thing, and activity.
And Rosanna, you asked a question here. Can you give us more information so we can address it? Because I don't know what information you're talking about.
Let me just add one more thing. I've had a lot of good experiences with singing bowls. I use the singing bowls to cleanse the energy in the homes. And there's so many times where the kids are acting up and they're fighting with the parents, and you cleanse the energy. And for a good time, it will calm them down, and it will shift the energy in the house and make it more positive. It doesn't mean it's always going to stay there. You're going to have to do it again, especially with teenagers. But I have seen a lot of good stuff. I mean, I had one lady where she was fighting with her parents constantly, and after doing the singing bowl and cleansing the whole house with it, they never had any more arguments. I mean, it was over a year later, and they were thanking me because they couldn't believe how calm she got.
Nice.
It was because of the negative energy in the house.
And then, there's the
Tibetan
Palo
prayer
Santo
bowls
too.
that are wonderful for cleansing energy. I love them. I have a huge one I bought in Kathmandu. Listen, there's one thing here though. Lisa says that she's going to start observing and journaling. I caution you. Fine, get a journal, take it and put it outside your home, or in the trunk of your car, up in the attic, far away from where it's handy. The reason I'm saying this is I want you to write down, when you have a paranormal experience, write down the time, the date, what's going on, exactly in detail, and then leave it right there. Don't go back to it. The reason I want you to put it someplace that's hard for you to get to is because you're going to find that when it isn't completely obvious, you're going to choose to ignore it, and that's better. You don't want to feed it. You don't want to give it energy. And if you've got that journal right next to you all the time, then you're going to be intent to write everything down, and you're going to give it a lot more energy, and you're going to manifest it more.
Yeah.
You'll become part of that engine for the activity. So please, if you're going to journal, absolutely take it and put it far away from you, in the garage or somewhere else that's obscure, and you have to make an effort to go there.
And you definitely don't want it to be another source of anxiety for you, like Chris said. Because having that thing around all the time, it's going to be like, oh my gosh, okay, here's my journal. You're creating an anxious environment again. So please listen to Chris.
I'm sorry. I'm going to have to leave pretty quick here because I've got to make dinner for my daughter. But the reason why I came into the panel was because Jeff ignored my question earlier, and so I want to ask that.
Go ahead, ask. I did not ignore your question.
You totally ignored my question.
Oh
Totally.
my God.
It did not come up once.
Can we say something else though? There's a ghost in Chris's right side. Everybody watch that arm move. Yeah, that arm's moving. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think there's something blue behind you.
On your, it'd be
side.
on your left. The
Is
arm
it an ironing board?
You mean over on this side?
Nope. That side.
That's
Yep.
Outside.
something outside blowing in the breeze.
That's not a ghost. They're doing construction out there, and that's flapping coverage here.
Well, now I'm depressed.
The demon.
It does have horns.
No.
Sam, ask your question.
Sorry. Rain did. Sam asked it. Ask away.
I have someone I know that is a very powerful psychic, and he actually does. He has a group of psychics that do investigations working with police. So he's very well established. He has this idea that there are dark entities that specifically look to attach to alcoholics or people experiencing blackouts during drinking. He claims that he has seen these entities. Like I think he said he saw 3 of these entities on the roof of a bar one time, and someone came out just hammered and actually saw one of these entities enter that person. So I was just wondering if anybody else has heard of anything along these lines. My personal theory is that it may not be specific to alcoholism, but that these are dark entities that are looking to feed on the energy of others, and that is just an opportunity of weakness within the individual to be able to attach to that individual and sort of feed on them.
So I've heard the theory that, especially when you're dealing with alcohol and substance abuse, that there are certain negative attachments that are looking to prey onto you. And so during that vulnerable, weakened state of mind, you can potentially have that attachment inhabit your body, live in you, and cause you to be more self-destructive. So I have mixed feelings about that. I do believe in the supernatural side. I do believe in the Christian side of things. I do believe that some of the things that we go through, some of these psychological issues that we go through, I do believe to a small extent that there is some sort of supernatural influence, but not to the extent where it's going to possess you, if you get what I'm saying.
Okay.
It's
More of an attachment.
interesting. raise that, Sam, because Kim, who's the Assistant Regional Director for Australia and New Zealand, whose house Chris is sitting in at the moment, she raised that idea with me. She had seen it on a television program, and she actually sent me a clip, which I'll have to forward to you, of two psychics or investigators talking about exactly the same thing. One of them actually produced a psychic drawing of what they believed one of these entities looked like. So it's really interesting to hear you raise that same idea. I had never come across it before, and this video clip and Kim talking about it was the first time that it had been raised with me. I think it's really interesting. I'll probably be careful what I say. I know somebody whose behaviour changed. I mean, I know it's very normal for people's behaviour to change dramatically under the influence of drink, but this is somebody who is a habitual heavy drinker, and they exhibited some quite peculiar behaviour whilst unconscious, which really didn't seem human. Kind of gnashing of teeth and, snarling and stuff, which I found quite strange. And I mean, could just be a strange dream or something, I suppose, that they were having. But, equally, it does make you wonder about that.
I've never encountered it myself. I've heard about it. I think I believe it's possible. I don't know, maybe like Ken was saying, I don't know if it's directly just going after somebody who's an alcoholic, but I've never come across it, but it's definitely possible. I've heard a lot about it.
And I would tie in the alcoholism and drug abuse together.
Yeah.
I think it's basically addiction of chemical substances.
Alice,
again, that's
on my shoulder. Sorry.
I'm sorry, what?
You have spirits on your shoulder. Again, addiction, that's a mental health issue, isn't it? And it really does feed into exactly what we're talking about, which is that, alcohol abuse or drug abuse is leaving people vulnerable to attack by malevolent entities. And, potentially that is exactly what's been seen, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the alcohol itself, the drugs itself, especially when you're talking about something heavy like heroin or methamphetamines, is definitely going to change a person's behavior. It changes their brain chemistry. But like what you were saying, somebody that has been an alcoholic for a while, you've seen their behavior when they're on a bender, and now it's different. That would make me suspicious.
It's a fine line because their behavior is constantly, up and down depending on what they're on, how much they're on. It is definitely tough to determine.
Right.
All right. Actually, we only have like 8 minutes left, and there's one thing I wanted to do tonight as we wrap the show up. We do have a mental health demonic case book review that I'd like to show a video to and get all your thoughts on this. So let me pop this video up. We're all going to watch this here for a couple minutes. It's like 2 minutes and 40 seconds. And then I want your opinions.
Here's a photo here that says the bloodstains on Maurice's t-shirt that Chris McKinnell discovered while working in the greenhouse with Maurice. Photo by Chris Marshall. There was no guy named Chris Marshall there that day.
We should love the way this.
He did have bloody t-shirt, but we didn't get photos of it, unfortunately.
So do the other Satan's Harvest have your name on it?
Yeah. And this is from two reporters.
We report, you decide. I'm getting his I'm getting his commentary on the Satan's Harvest.
It's ridiculous. I mean, don't get me wrong. There was a confrontation with him under possession in the greenhouse. That happened. There were no words. It was just 3 crosses and blood on his back, and they soaked through the t-shirt. And
Joe, hit the mute
I gotta
button,
see if
please.
they at least got one thing right here. Yeah, at least it says that there was no. Wait a minute. There was no mark on his back. On the T-shirt, it was Snow White. Yeah, that was true too.
It wasn't an I Love You Joe Frankie t-shirt? You're gonna be the first one to wear it.
That'll be in the 2022 remake.
You love me. Yeah.
That'll be in the
I do
remake
love you,
edition
yes,
of the book.
that's true.
Part
But-
2 is going to be called Anaconda's Harvest.
Oh, God, help us.
Python Paranormal. Can you make that shirt? Python Paranormal.
Okay, you guys
No,
need to
because
start
you're
writing
not
down these ideas you
Python.
want me to do.
You're an anaconda.
Hulk Hogan.
The Python. Not their words. Yeah, I used to have this. I guess I still
The Hogan. You see that little kid? I saw a video, little kid, he went up to the Hulk Hogan.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and he's like, what you gonna do when he's 23 expect I'm gunning for you. He was like 11 years old. It was cute, it was adorable.
You seemed so impressed with that book, Chris.
Oh my gosh. Oh.
That was a very serious book review, by the way, about a very serious case.
Talk about mental health.
Didn't have any idea that he was filming this for any reason.
Oh my gosh. Caught the Padre, the vulnerable.
Well, we had to bring Joe in somehow, so that was the way. You know, he wanted to make sure that in the new book, when the new version comes out, that Maurice is wearing an "I Love You, Joe Frankie" T-shirt.
Does Joe drive around everywhere with that banner of his huge face? And does he just pull it out everywhere he goes?
No, he drives around with his Annabelle doll.
That's okay. You drive around with the official Joe Frankie
Yes.
fan club.
Yeah, Yeah, we
Wait.
got one on
just
our
brought
car.
tears to my eyes, man.
Sticker on your
You just brought
car.
tears to my eyes, man.
Wait, I just got Joe one of those big 10-foot backdrops. So
Yeah, he's pretty proud of that too. He whips that out
Just,
whenever
you know,
he can.
we do read these books for our Patreon supporters with my own added commentary, because God knows you can't shut me up. So I'm going to give you my 2 cents on everything. But it's a good way for you to support the foundation and the work we do. So if anybody wants to join the Patreon account, perhaps we can give a link, because God knows I don't know how to get there.
Well, it's the
It's on the
Warren Legacy
website.
Foundation.
Go to the
Yeah,
website.
Yep. I will say this too.
WarrenLegacy.com.
I'm pretty proud of the Warren Files Declassified this month. We added a lot more to it. We had you investigating the Fort Felipe Real. I think.
Oh,
it was
that was a
Yeah.
very interesting
Yeah.
investigation in Peru.
Yeah, but
Definitely
it wasn't just
worth checking out.
It wasn't just like Chris talking this time. We actually had investigation footage and pictures of the place and things like that, and you guys telling the story inside the location, which I thought was really, really cool. It was a good addition this month.
And Jeff, tell us about the speakeasy.
Yes, so we are doing the Warren Speakeasy on Patreon as well. I think this month I'm going to open it up to the first 5 people that message the foundation from the public. We want to hear your experiences. This is a show that we want the I don't want to say fans, but you know what I mean, the followers to contribute to. We don't want to run the show. We don't want it to be this, just like the Warren Files. We want you guys to tell us your thoughts and your experiences. So that's the idea behind that. And I believe it's listed as a $10 or more a month Patreon member right now, but right now it's open to everybody. But I am going to put a post on the public page, and I'm going to take 5 people, just 5 random people, the first 5, and you tell us your experiences. I think it'll be a good show this month.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, the Speakeasy is an open forum, open
Yes.
discussion forum. So, I mean, kind of similar to a panel, but like you said, open to members as well. And I mean, so many people have no place to discuss their personal experiences. They get without being judged, fear of being judged.
Yep.
Exactly.
And you do the same.
Sam,
thing,
you
Sam,
should
with
get
your-
going and give your daughter a big hug for us. We've hit the end of the show anyway.
She
What
snagged me
are you going
during
to feed her this evening?
Yep.
Oh, wait a minute. One other thing, everyone in the audience, please congratulate Sam. He just got engaged.
Yes, he did.
Oh,
Congratulations,
yes.
Sam.
Congratulations, Sam. I've been enjoying your photos.
Thank you very much.
Well done. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Good to
you.
see you happy.
Yeah, very
Does anybody know the next topic for 2 weeks from now, so we can end it with that? Or
I believe it's stop spending money on the tech.
Oh, so this one is basically just for you.
I was going to say, as Bill has 4 tables of equipment.
How about the psychological perils of having your own face on a huge banner?
How about growing out an epic beard as an investigator? That was a pretty epic beard in that video. I mean, I gotta admit, that was pretty good. Wife made me trim it.
We had
I
to
just
show
want to
this
make it
because
very clear. I did not have these banners made with my face on them. That's Bill.
yeah, we had to add that video because like you guys all said earlier, humor is happiness, right? And that was a funny video, so let's end it with that, and let's all have a laugh and enjoy our life.
That's how tight knit we are. That's how tight knit we are.
Yep. So
God bless you all, and guys, thank you for joining us as
Thank
usual.
Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Talk to you all soon, and for our listeners, our supporters, thank you. God bless you.